What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another video. Today we are talking about my 1M clone, my 135. I've had a lot of people ask what the ownership experience has been like with this car. I just surpassed 1 year of ownership with this amazing car, and I can't wait to tell you guys a little bit about everything that I've experienced along the way of this journey so far. It's definitely had its ups and downs, but mostly ups. Regardless of what you hear about the M54, not all of it is true. A lot of it comes down to the way that owners take care of them and just the condition of the overall engines. But it's gonna be a good video. Let's get into it. All right, you guys, so first and foremost, this is my 2009 BMW 135 with the M54. I did in fact convert this thing over to a 1M clone. If you guys are interested in every single detail and modification, I have everything listed down below, as well as a video where I talk about every modification on this car. So this video will not be that because we have already done it, but we will be talking about the overall experience of owning this car for the past year. Before we jump into the video, you guys, I just want to let you know that we do have the American Panda badges for all BMWs back on sale and available. I will have them linked down below. You guys have asked for these before, but basically what we do is we sand down the entire badge and we just delete the chrome outer ring, and then we paint them all black and re-clear coat each badge. The quality is absolutely nuts. You guys have been asking for those for a while, so we started making them again. In addition to that, we also have the rear flares available. If you are interested in going 1M clone with your 135, we have started producing the fiberglass rear flares that mock the real 1M rear quarter panels. Obviously, they're not metal, but they are fiberglass. If you don't want to spend all of the money to buy the entire rear quarter panels from the 1M, you can just get the fiberglass rear flares like I did on my car, and it turned out great. Just got to make sure that you know a little bit about bodywork and have the proper people paint it and do the finishing touches. But yeah, I mean, you could never tell that this is actually not a real 1M unless you look at the sunroof. But as far as everything else on this car, I've used OEM parts, front bumper, fenders, side skirts, all of that. Again, if you guys are interested in every little modification, I have a full video out on that. Okay, so all of that stuff will be linked down in the description for you guys. Let's talk about my 135 and what the ownership experience has been so far with this car. In the beginning, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, it was a ton of work. When I bought this car, it did not have an engine in it. It was missing a bunch of pieces, so it did take quite a bit of time and resourcing and money to get this thing back onto the road. I think it actually worked out for the better though, because I bought my N54 motor and transmission separately, and that gave me the opportunity to really refresh every single seal, do the rod bearings, walnut blasting, all new gaskets, new timing chain guide, fresh valve cover, basically everything that you would want to do on a higher mileage N54, but it's just 10 times easier with the engine actually out of the car. So in retrospect, it was actually sort of a blessing that I was able to just buy this car the way it was and just get my motor separately outside of the car. I will say that I had to source a lot of little things, just miscellaneous parts that you never quite realize that you need until you're deep into a build. And in order to get this thing actually on the road, I did have to find a lot of extra little parts that we were just missing. So let's fast forward to when we actually got this car running. Once I finally got this thing on the road, it was running flawlessly. I did have to do some break-in mileage because I had a brand new clutch in the car, but right within the first month, I had a few things go wrong. One of my Vano solenoids did end up failing, which apparently is a pretty common thing with these cars. However, ever since I've replaced that Vano solenoid, I haven't had any issues. And the other issue that popped up almost immediately, this car is running a bucketless low-pressure fuel pump setup, and some of the wires became entangled. Not really the car's fault or anything to do with reliability. I would say that we just sort of rushed through it and we didn't really think that out. So I did have to pull that back out and fix it. But again, ever since that, I've put thousands of miles onto this motor and the chassis, and it's been absolutely flawless. I've had zero issues. Now, I haven't really touched any of the suspension components yet because I am gonna do some major suspension work to this car, including subframe work, full Öhlins road and track coilover setup, either some Vorschlag or Milway camber plates, and all of the the bushings and arms will be touched, whether I go SPL catalog or solid subframe bushings. It's going to be a lot of little things here and there. One of the other little things that failed on this car were the rear sway bar end links. They were just old, the bushings were dry rotted, and so I started getting some clunking in the rear, but that is a pretty easy job. So I just swapped those out, and ever since I've done that, it's been solid. I will say, however, I have learned over the years when it comes to motor mounts and bushings, differential reinforcement plates, different mounts that you can use within the drivetrain, things of that nature, I have learned over the years that there's a good mix between OEM and aftermarket and solid that is just right. On my E36, I sort of went all in and got solid subframe bushings, PowerFlex transmission mounts and motor mounts, and it ended up being just too much. It ended up being overkill for that car. You started getting a lot of vibrations from the drivetrain and the motor, and it was just overkill for the street. So one thing that I learned off of the E36 M3 that I sort of applied on the E92 M3, and I will be applying to this, is to just find that happy medium between refreshing and just giving the car OEM bushings or brand new control arms, and also replacing some of the bushings and some of the mounts with aftermarket. There's a good mixture in there that I think makes up for a perfect symphony of a street car setup, because you can definitely go too far and it just sort of takes away from the driving when you're on the street. And obviously if you're going to go to the track, you kind of want the opposite end of that. You want solid everything and super sturdy motor mounts. It just depends on what the application of the car is, but my cars tend to be more street cars than they are track cars. So it's really just about finding that right mixture of mounts, bushings, and different control arm options. So post refreshment, this motor has about 5,000 miles on it so far. That's really about how many miles I've put on this car in the past year. Now you do have to think this car was in the body shop for a while getting painted. I also have my E92 M3, which gets driven a lot. So this isn't like a daily driven car. It's just more of like my weekend fun car. The original chassis and body has 152,000 miles on it. However, you would never guess that because the whole thing has pretty much been refinished. It looks basically brand new. Everything underneath will get touched in the future once I start addressing all of those bushings and suspension components. But outside of that, ownership experience has been really, really awesome on this car. The 1 Series in general is easily one of my, if not my favorite BMW chassis. As you know, everything these days is massive and heavy, and there's just something to be said about a smaller, nimble, lightweight car like this that is just so much fun to drive. It's like the perfect combination between an E46 and an E92. It's a little bit shorter, a little bit stumpier, but once you go with the 1M route, the 1M clone body route, this thing looks like a freaking bulldog, dude. It is so wide, and I know that camera never does this car quite the justice that it deserves, because in real life, this thing is just so big for how short it is. When you end up going the 1M route, these fenders, front and rear, are the same width as an E90 or E92 M3. So to put that into perspective, when you have a shorter car like this that's as wide as those cars are, it looks extremely wide because of how short the car is. It really just gives this car a mean bulldog presence, and that's something that I absolutely love about the 135 going to the 1M clone. But even if you don't go to the 1M clone, the 135 is just still an awesome platform. You're still getting that super lightweight, nimble chassis that still has a lot of that authentic feel to it. Nothing is too overdone or electronic in these cars. You're still getting a lot of that E46, E92 feeling. Tons of connection in this car. There's always a place for these newer cars that are super fast, super tech savvy, but these cars had to walk so those cars could run. And there's just nothing quite like a 1 Series, man. They are so fun. They're like little go-karts. Now this car does have the upgraded twins by Mosselman. It's probably somewhere in the 500 wheel horsepower range right now. The car is nowhere near finished. I have a lot more work to do to it. But even in the state it's in right now, this thing is just so fun to drive. It makes all of the right noises, feels really good. I will say, going from my E92 M3 to this, the E92 obviously handles way better because it is an actual, a true M car. However, you can do work to these cars. We recently built a friend of mine's 135 over at CES Motorsport, and we did a ton of suspension work to that car. Full SPL catalog, full KW Club Sport coilovers, and that thing handles so good. And all of the subframes in that car are the original 135 subframes. So you don't have to go over to the E9X subframes like a lot of people think you do in order to make these cars handle good, but you will have to spend a little bit of money to make it feel as good as an E9X M3. At the end of the day, these are not M cars, so they do not handle like M cars. They have a lot of slosh to them, a lot of just body roll. You can definitely eliminate some of that with some decent coilovers or springs, but you're just not going to get into that M category until you really start addressing some of the arms, the bushings, the mounts, and things of that nature. But yeah, you guys, I really can't say it enough. Like, the ownership experience of this car has just been so satisfying and so much fun. It's just such a cool and unique build in my opinion, and I really am proud of the way that this one turned out. We literally just wrapped up some of the stuff in the interior. I did convert everything over to black. This car originally had the red inserts on all the door cards. It had the red seats. Unpopular opinion, I was kind of just over the red and I wanted just more of a all black murdered out look, which I just think looks so freaking good, man. Pole positions in this car are just perfect. This is the perfect seat setup for this car. You are locked in, you are engaged when you drive this thing, man. No nav, manual. It is all about driving. This is the driver's spec right here, and I can't get enough of this car, man. I can't get enough of talking about it. I can't get enough of looking at it. I can't get enough of driving it. It just makes me so happy. So if you are on the fence about buying a 135 in general, obviously do your due diligence. You know, the N54s, they can be hit or miss. We're finding a lot of them with higher mileage, and the problem is, you know, when these cars were a little bit cheaper, a lot of people were buying them and just driving them and not really doing the necessary maintenance on them. And just like any older BMW or just car in general, it takes maintenance to keep these cars in good standing order. Any car that is built for driving and fun and power, you are going to have to maintain it. There is no getting around that. Gaskets, seals, mounts, bushings, even old dry rotted hoses and wires, all of that stuff needs to be addressed. Drivetrains, universal flex disc, clutches, it can get costly, but in my opinion, it is 100% worth it. And like I said, I kind of found myself in the perfect opportunity and position with this one because the motor was already out of the car. So I just took the necessary steps to completely refresh everything. So this thing should be set and sound for another 80,000, 100,000 miles without even having to touch anything. Obviously, that's not ideal for everyone. Not everyone is going to want to have to buy a car and then also buy a motor. But even if you don't have the motor out of the car, there's still a lot of things that you can tackle in order to make sure that your engine and your car lasts you much longer. I think N54s just mostly get a bad rep because of some of the people who have previously owned them. And once they become too maintenance cost heavy, they tend to just unload them onto the next person. Because let's be honest, once you start having to replace a lot of those things, it can get expensive. And it is sort of like a snowball effect. One thing will go bad, the next thing goes bad. The same is true if you want to make a lot of power on these engines. Once you start creeping up to the mid 6s, closer to 700s, you are going to have components that are going to start failing. We dyno and tune these cars weekly at CES Motorsport. We've seen it all, and we can pretty much predict what is going to go wrong next on each car that comes in with an N54 that wants to push power. So preventative maintenance and supporting mods are very, very important when you're trying to push these cars a bit further and really boost up the power. In the end, personally, I think it's worth it, but I just love cars. I love investing in building these cars and turning them into just monsters. It is my favorite thing to do on this planet. And so to me, it's worth it, but it may not be worth it to everybody. Overall, I give my ownership experience of this car a 10 out of 10. I absolutely love this car. This car would never leave my possession. I've almost touched every single little thing on this car, minus some of the things in the subframes, but that will be addressed. And it's just a special one. It's just a very, very unique and special project to me. The 135 prices right now are a bit all over the place. I've seen some on Marketplace that are extremely high that I don't think are worth it at all. And then I've also found some that are extremely cheap, but likely need a ton of work. So you can really shop around and find that right spot for you. I paid $5,000 for this car when it had no motor in it, and it was sitting in a grass field for 2 years. So you can imagine it was in pretty rough shape, but I had the vision and I knew that if I just stayed true to it, kept working on it week after week, at some point the thing would look really good and be a ton of fun to drive. So anyways, that has been my ownership experience so far. It's been really, really good. If you guys are interested in buying one, I highly suggest you do. But hopefully this video brought you guys some value. If you have any questions for me, leave them down in the comments. We'll see you in the next video. Peace.